Good afternoon, sir, and good afternoon to everybody who is present over here. Myself, Kushagra Chitransh, and I'm from Electronics and Communication Engineering Department. And pardon me if I cough because I was suffering from COVID positive. I was COVID positive, so I might cough. So just excuse me for that. So the movie that was allotted to me was Haider, and if I have to give it a one-line review for it, then it was an inspirational masterpiece with captivating screenplay and blend of acting magic. Now, the credits and the cast. The cast had director Vishal Bhardwaj, produced by Siddharth Roy and Vishal Bhardwaj, written by Bashrat Peer and Vishal Bhardwaj. Cinematography was done by Pankaj Kumar. Starring was a pool of great talent of the industry: Shahid Kapoor, Tabu, Shraddha Kapoor, KK Menon, and late great Irfan Khan. Let's come to the plot and overview of it. Heather it is a young boy from the valley who resides with his family in the town of Anantnag. The setting is a peaceful one until we are met with the brutality of terrorism. Owing to the threats, he is sent to Aligarh for higher education. Meanwhile, back at home, Heather's father, who is a doctor also, gets caught red-handed in the crime of assisting the terrorist. He is detained in the army camp and his family is unaware of his location. When Heather returns, he finds that his mother has moved on in her life as if nothing has happened and was about to marry Heather's uncle. Heather is heartbroken, but he strives. He goes to every possible location. He goes to all camps, police station, and just wants to get a news about where his father has been detained. But he could find no news of him. And one day he gets the news of his father's death from his father's prison mate. It was a custodial death, and the dead body was thrown in the river. The last message conveyed to Heather was to take revenge, and revenge from his uncle who helped the army and ditched Heather's father. Heather's uncle, who in the meantime had become a local politician, also was keeping a track on Heather, and he got to know about this development. Now he knew that his secrets were open and feared that Heather could kill him. So he used the local police go and tried to take a misadventure to give Heather the same end as that was of his father. Now the climax is set. Heather, having blood in his eyes, wants to seek revenge, and on the other hand, Heather's uncle, who wants to end this chapter once and for all. And in the middle of this is a helpless mother who wants to justify her stand in the eyes of her son. She doesn't want the same end of her son as was of her husband. Now, I have knowingly left the end of it because it was supposed to be narrated rather to be written. The end was mesmerizing. Heather's mother sacrificing her own life to teach that very thing to his son, that revenge will only bring revenge. Heather understands it, and he begins a journey without seeking revenge. Now, what are the human rights violations that are depicted in this movie? Well, they are a violation of human dignity, which is obviously done with the people of Kashmir, the local police, the army. They don't, really talk with them in a good manner. The regional discrimination, which is but obvious whenever there is a person who says that his identity is Kashmiri, then people nearby, they suspect him. Then there is censorship and denial from true information. There is censorship. The people are of the detained ones are not allowed. They are not given the information that where they are kept, where there's a detention center, what even they are alive or they are dead. Nothing is informed to them. Court trial is denied. Whenever there is a detention, the human rights says that there should be a court trial given to the accused. But here we find no court trial. And last but not the least, in fact, the most important, is the torture, detention, and custodial death which takes place. There is scenes of torture in the detention camps, and years and years of torture, no time period upon it, and maybe I would say the lucky one get a custodial death because that torture is, more painful than death. Let's come to the relevant article. These are the relevant articles: Article 1, Article 2, Article 6, Article 5 and 9, and Article 19 that have been violated and has been depicted in the movie. Let's come to the conclusion of it. And from the conclusion, I would try to, give a view about what I interpreted about this movie. Revenge begets revenge. Whenever there is a torture or there is something bad done to a person, and he or his generation, they try to seek revenge, it ignites a chain reaction, because when he goes for revenge, the further generation would come back and want to take revenge. Second, that torture practices needs to be curtailed. Now, obviously, torture practices, overnight they cannot be stopped. But what can be done, like in the police system of India, many states, they have abolished the third degree of torture. Similarly, there can be set of rules that can be given that up to what level a person can be tortured, whether it be in a detention camp or whether it be in custody or in prison. There has to be a judicial statement given upon it. Psychology needs to be changed, and not just of ours but also of the people of Kashmir. They need to be made feel Indian. They are just Indian on paper. Whenever you talk to them, you say that they are Kashmiri as if there is something different. They're not Indians. We need to change the psychology. We need to change the psychology, and we need to try and make them feel that yes, they too are part of the mainstream. And that is what the next conclusion is, that we need to add them into the mainstream. We need to add them through technology. We need to add them through social infrastructure building. We need to connect them with the culture. We need to keep their own cultural identity alive, and we need to also add them to the Indian identities, Indian culture. And then people must be educated rather than being just made literate, which is very obvious. Haider is a brilliant person, is a brilliant intellectual mind, is a great poet, but is brainwashed. He is literate. People say that because people are illiterate, they get brainwashed. No, because they are uneducated, they get brainwashed. And last is, militants are not born, they are made. He was not a militant, obviously. He just wanted to know where his father was. When he gets to know the amount of torture his father faced, he was forced to pick up weapon. Now, this is not something that he picked up weapon against the army, but he picked up weapons against his own uncle. Now, there could be cases which are unheard of, in which cases these could be false stories that have been cooked up and made to brainwash. But these needs to be eliminated, and this has to start from our end, because we are the more privileged one. Now, I would like to also mention certain point that the true sense of human right is felt in this movie. And the understanding is clear that human right violation will actually create ground for further human rights violation. Whenever somebody is tortured, a human right violation takes place against him. That create a sense of fear in the society. That create a sense of revolt, a sense of rebel. And that will again ignite this chain reaction. And further human rights violation needs to be done. So the human right violation, in the sense by which human rights were actually introduced, that we need to stop this. We need to make this world propagate a universal harmony among people, and make this world a better place. And in the end, I would like to finish it with a line that I wrote when I saw this movie, that Kashmir, well, it is an interesting prison with open air and clean water. It is also home to empty souls and voiceless screams. Here are not only the climate changing, but also count of martyrs changing in every quarter, and perhaps an open prison upon which we all must ponder. And with these lines, I would like to end this presentation, and I would also like to thank everybody for giving their time and allowing me to present this.
Thank you, Kushagra, for an amazing presentation, I must say. Short, sweet, brief, and amazingly, I will say, accurate presentation, which we usually want from human rights perspective. But from Kushagra Chitransh, I do not expect a couple of spelling mistakes.
I'm really sorry, sir. Yeah.
One was in the regional, I guess so, and the other was in psychological.
Okay, I'll correct it, sir.
Yeah, obviously, those are just in between. It can happen to anybody. So you may also correct them. Yes. Apart from that, the observations and the way you have presented was an amazing presentation. So what was the new word which you have learned from this movie? What was the new word which you have learned from this movie?
What was the new word which I have learned from this movie? Yeah. Sir, actually, it was not a new word, but a new phrase. And since the presentation was supposed to be in English, so I didn't mention it. But I think that now I might mention it. It's a Kashmir mein upar khuda hai aur niche fauj hai. Now this has a very deep sense.
When I watched the movie, I learned the word chutzpah. from this
Ah,
movie.
yes, 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 yes.
And I was very amazed to know that this is actually an English word, which we
Okay,
think that it is an Hindi word.
I was also unaware of it.
Anyways, thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Thanks a lot to Kushagra for his presentation. Now we will move forward to Prabhav Dogra.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Prabhav Dogra and I'll be presenting my movie Just Mercy. And I'll be hoping that at the end of the presentation you will get some insights and some points to ponder upon. So this is the theatrical poster of the movie and the cast in credit. Michael B. Jordan as Brian Stevenson, Jamie Foxx as Walter McMillan, Bry Larson as Eva Ansley, and other directors and writing credits. So what is the rating of this movie? It has an IMDb rating of 7.6 out of 10 and 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. So before I move to the next part of my presentation and the main part of my presentation, I would like to give a spoiler alert to everyone. The next part has major spoilers, so watch at your own risk. So some background info about the movie. This movie is a legal drama based in the state of Alabama, a state in southern part of United States of America. The main protagonists of the movie are Brian Stevenson and Walter Johnny D. McMillan, or Johnny D. So Brian Stevenson is a Harvard Law graduate seeking justice for misrepresented and underrepresented convicted felons on death row. Felons whose lawyer told them to plead guilty just that so that the case can get over with. Lawyers who told them that lawyers who didn't bother to even set up a defense and didn't even allow the defendant to testify. Such a convict in the story is Johnny D. Johnny D is put on death row 1 year before his trial for the murder of an 18-year-old white woman on the basis of tampered evidence. So a plot overview. Brian, being an idealist, opens a legal center called as Equal Justice Initiative for inmates on death row after obtaining federal funding. Brian soon digs into the case of Johnny D, as this for the image shows the first meet of Brian and Johnny D. Brian soon digs into the case of Johnny D and finds inconsistencies in the case, including evidence and testimony of the main witness. In fact, he realizes that the entire case is based on the contradictory state testimony of a convicted felon, Ralph Myers, who had motive to lie. In midst of seeking justice, Brian is mistreated by several police officers and guards. In fact, one of the officers made him strip search him while he was trying to meet an inmate, which is not necessary and is not required by the law. His car is also stopped in road midway while he's being arrested by a police officer. Another officer searches through his car trying to find some case files or something. So Brian gets the main witness who made the whole story up under police pressure to tell the truth. So now all the case against the Johnny D is in pieces, and there's no evidence that the state already has that can prove him guilty. So Brian files a motion for retrial, which is denied, which is a shocking scene in the movie because as the prosecution didn't have any supporting evidence that proved that the Johnny D was guilty. So seeing the difficult circumstances and the odds, even the system against Brian, he decided to gather public trust and appears on a TV show. Brian then files a motion to drop all charges against Johnny D, where the prosecutor even joined the motion. So, like, imagine being on death row for 6 years, and then the prosecutor uh, who accepted that who thought that you were the criminal, thought only on the basis of less evidence and without even checking the proper evidence. So Johnny D was in such a case, and after 6 years, he was removed from the death row, not knowing throughout all the 6 years he didn't know at what time he will be executed. The scene shows that his son is standing up in the court of the law and saying that he ain't done nothing wrong. So I interpreted even the movie title in two ways: fair mercy or a rhetorical question as just mercy. Fair mercy is like pretty self-explanatory, as Johnny D was wrongfully condemned in a horrific act that he didn't commit, and he was given fair mercy that he deserved. Or just mercy, like after 6 years he was released, and that also after mercy. So is just mercy definable and is satisfiable for him. Human rights issues and violations, some that I noticed in the movie. Torture, the main witness who testified against Johnny D was tortured and forced to give a testimony. Racial discrimination, as previously discussed in the slide. Arbitrary arrest, people were randomly arrested so as to threaten them that they don't give any testimony that proved the innocence of Johnny D, that supported the innocence of Johnny D. Death penalty, pretty explanatory, and unfair judiciary. Even in this case, the final trial, the black people were. It wasn't like in the movie. It wasn't like that. There weren't laws. There were laws that prevented black people from entering anywhere, but the white police officers allowed them at the last to enter in the court, which was illegal, unfair judiciary, and there were no, not to mention there were no black people in the jury. Relevant articles being violated: Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. So, moving on to the favorite part of my presentation. So, quotes. So, I read many quotes, and had a really hard time deciding which quote to put in. But after thinking about it a lot, I decided to put this quote in. So before I move to the quote, I would like to give up some background information. This was a quote said by Brian in the final trial where charges against Johnny D were dismissed. It's easy to see this case as one man trying to prove his innocence. But when you take a black man and you put him on death row a year before his trial and exclude black people from serving on his jury, when you base your conviction on coarse testimony of a white villain and ignore the testimony of 24 law-abiding black witnesses, when any evidence proving his innocence is suppressed and anyone who tries to tell the truth is threatened, then this case becomes more than the trial of just a single defendant. It becomes a test of whether we are going to be governed by fear and by anger or by the rule of law. If the people standing at the back of this courtroom are all presumed guilty when accused, if they have to leave here and wait for this very thing to happen to them, if you're just going to accept the system that treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, then we can't claim to be just. If we say we are committed to equal justice under law, to protecting the rights of every citizen, regardless of wealth, race, or status, then we have to end this nightmare for Walter McMillan and his family. The charges against him have been proven to be a false construction of desperate people, fueled by bigotry and bias, who ignore the truth in exchange for easy solution, and that's not the law. That's not justice, that's not right. I ask that this case be dismissed immediately. So moving on to conclusion. These are basically my learnings from the movie. One thing that I learned was why human rights violations deserve a special place and why it deserves basically a special course in our syllabus. People view state as a supreme institution, and when that institution violates the law of its citizens whose rights it's supposed to uphold, then people feel really helpless and have no place to go. And to expand on this, I would sharing a concept in a theory in psychology called as theory of association. This basically says that people develop concepts by overlapping differences. Like if you press a button and if a baby presses a button and every time he presses the button, a candy comes out, he starts relating to it with the button resulting into candy. But if this kind of behavior is exposed to black children or any children in young age, then they can develop wrong concepts. As in the case of the movie, black children were facing situations in which adults were being prosecuted for committing no crime and were all oppressed all the time. So this can result in a serious situation in the minds and serious thinking disorientation in the minds of the children. So developing your opinion before choosing a side is very important. So most of the people I know tell me that you should develop a political opinion and be on the right side or left side or be or 0 or 1. But after seeing this movie, I learned that there isn't a black and one, but black and one and many shades of gray in between. So
2 minutes more.
Premature opinions are dangerous, and before choosing a side, you should considering all the facts and figures is very important. But it's easier said than done because of the huge manipulation being done in the media these days. Government is not always the enemy. As Sumanta sir has already said a lot of times that government just tries its best to uh, maintain peace and order so that it can get re-elected. But in this movie, I realized that in this movie also, it's people will try. Many people, if they haven't studied human rights, will blame the government for all the cases. But government had already made laws that promoted the equality. I'm not saying that government wasn't responsible. It was responsible, but it was not completely responsible. And if you notice in the first slide, I said that it was a federal funding that allowed Brian to open a institution that held inmates. Upholding the law is just as important as making them. It's like in the movie, it was on paper, the whole procedure was legal, but practically in practical, the system was hugely biased, and even the judges and police were in on discrimination. So trivia: Brian Stevenson is a world-renowned civil rights defense.
Conclude, Prabhav.
So, like, I would like the main thing that I would like to say is that the deleted scenes in the movie or the featurettes in the movie were very good. There was a scene that I wanted to include, but because of the time constraint and the scene was very big, so I couldn't include it. But if someone watches it, then you should definitely watch that scene. And this is the bibliography. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhav, for an amazing presentation. As expected, you nailed it. Just that couple of things I may like to remind you. It's not related to your presentation, but it's related to our course. And again, you are not wrong. You remember when we were studying death penalty, I told you about the race and death penalty equation. And you, I guess so, was the person who objected that this is not exactly the case. But I hope so after watching this movie, and there are n number of movies and data which are available, that you now understand that there is a genuine difference between what is justice and what is justice for blacks in the United States of America, right?
Yes, sir, I remember seeing that.
And I could see your presentation being bent now on the track, which I was trying to propose during those days, those initial days of our studying human rights together, because this is the thing not only about United States of America, but I guess so about any kind of heterogeneous population which we find in most of the parts of the world, that there is some kind of bias in the judiciary which helps pronounce such kind of draconian judgments in favor or against some people, and definitely in favor of some people as well.
Yes,
So
sir.
this is something which we should learn as educated people, that irrespective of the fact that and you said it very right, that it's not only making laws but also upholding them which makes the difference, and which is the right thing to do, because we have several laws, but we seldom go on to uphold them as well. And that creates the biggest problem. So thank you, Prabhav. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really an amazing presentation.